I just pepper sprayed the owner of the hotel. But I didn't know he was the owner. I thought he was a drunk in a tuxedo stealing the $5,000 scotch. Most men scream when you hit them with military-grade capsicum. He didn't scream. He inhaled it. He looked at me with eyes that turned molten gold, licked his lips, and growled one word. Spicy. Now he won't fire me. He won't let me quit. He just follows me around the hotel, daring me to do it again. My name is Cleo, and I accidentally started a war with the Alpha King. And the worst part? I think I'm winning. Welcome back to Raven's Library. Before we unlock today's chapter, I have a quick question for the pack. Where in the world are you listening from? Drop your city, country, or flag in the comments right now. I love seeing how global this community is becoming. And if you hate waiting for cliffhangers, hit that join button below. Members get early access to every single upload, plus exclusive loyalty badges to show off your status in the comments. Join the inner circle, skip the wait, and get the story first. Now, get comfortable. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Trespasser. You have exactly 3 seconds to put down that bottle before I drag you out of here by your overpriced tuxedo. I didn't wait for an answer. I marched across the plush carpet of the king's penthouse, my heels sinking into the wool, my clipboard held like a weapon against my chest. This was supposed to be a routine security sweep before the VIP arrival. Instead, I found a man leaning against the mahogany bar, casually uncorking a bottle of vintage scotch that cost more than my car. He didn't panic. He didn't even flinch. He just paused, the crystal stopper in his hand, and slowly turned around. He was huge. That was the first thing my brain registered. Broad shoulders that strained the fabric of his black jacket, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes that were currently dark with amusement. He looked me up and down, not with lechery, but with a terrifying, heavy curiosity. 1, I counted, stepping closer. 2. He swirled the amber liquid in the glass, bringing it to his lips. You're very loud for such a small thing, he said. His voice was a deep rumble that I felt in the soles of my feet. Is this how the Royal Zenith treats its guests? You aren't a guest, I snapped, stopping 3 feet away from him. This floor is restricted to the royal family and their entourage. You aren't on the list, which means you're trespassing. Put the glass down. He took a sip. A slow, deliberate sip, maintaining eye contact the entire time. The list, he mused, swallowing. I've always found lists to be suggestions. And I find them to be law, I countered. I'm Cleo, head of guest relations, and I'm a person who decides if you leave via the elevator or the service stairs. Right now, you're leaning toward the stairs, and it's 40 floors down. He laughed. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It was a dark, rich sound that seemed to vibrate the air in the room. He set the glass down and took a step toward me. Cleo. He tested the name, rolling it around his tongue like the scotch. You smell like vanilla and stress. And you smell like a lawsuit, I said, holding my ground even though every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. He was radiating power. It was rolling off him in waves, a heavy pressure that made the air feel thin. He wasn't just a drunk human. He was a wolf, a powerful one. But I wasn't about to let some high-status shifter bully me in my own hotel. I reached into my blazer pocket and gripped the canister of pepper spray I kept for unruly bachelor parties. Sir,
I am asking you once, I said, my voice steady. Step back. He didn't step back. He stepped closer. He was so close now, I could see the flecks of gold starting to bleed into his irises. He tilted his head, inhaling deeply near my neck. It was an invasion, a challenge. Make me, he whispered. Get off, I yelled. I didn't hesitate. I whipped the canister out and pressed the trigger. A cloud of orange mist exploded between us, hitting him directly in the face. It was the good stuff, maximum strength, designed to drop a grown man in seconds. I braced myself for the screaming. I expected him to fall to his knees, clawing at his eyes, giving me time to call security. I stepped back, hand trembling slightly, waiting for the thud of his body hitting the floor. But there was no thud. The mist cleared. He was still standing there. He hadn't even blinked. His eyes were glowing a brilliant electric gold now, the pupils blown wide. He tilted his head back and took a deep, shuddering breath, inhaling the chemical agent as if it were a fine perfume. A drop of the orange liquid ran down his cheek. He caught it with his tongue. My heart hammered against my ribs. Run, my brain screamed. Run now. He looked at me, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. He didn't look in pain. He looked euphoric. Finally, he growled, his voice dropping an octave into pure, unfiltered obsession. Spicy. Chapter 2. The Scent of Capsicum. I ran. I didn't look back to see if he was chasing me, and I certainly didn't stay to ask why he had reacted to a self-defense weapon like it was an aphrodisiac. I spun on my heel, my clipboard clutching to my chest like a shield, and bolted for the service elevator. I jammed the button repeatedly, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Spicy. The word echoed in my head, carried on that deep, rumbling baritone. Who says that? Who gets sprayed with liquid fire and compliments the flavor? The elevator doors pinged open and I threw myself inside, swiping my keycard with shaking hands. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of the penthouse hallway. It was empty. He hadn't followed me. But the air in the shaft still felt heavy, charged with the static electricity of his presence. I spent the next hour hiding in the linen closet on the 4th floor, hyperventilating quietly among stacks of freshly laundered Egyptian cotton towels. I went over the employee handbook in my head. Section 4, paragraph 2. Assaulting a guest is grounds for immediate termination and potential legal action. I was done. I was fired. I was probably going to jail. My radio crackled to life, making me jump and nearly knock over a tower of bath mats. Cleo, this is Henderson. My office, now. Mr. Henderson was the general manager. He was a beta wolf with a nervous tic and a fear of confrontation. His voice sounded strained, tight, like someone was holding a gun to his head. Or worse, threatening to leave a bad Yelp review. Copy, I whispered, my voice trembling. On my way. The walk to the executive suite felt like a funeral procession. Every staff member I passed seemed to look at me with pity. Did they know? Had the rumor mill already churned out the story of the crazy guest relations manager who blinded a VIP? I smoothed my skirt, fixed my messy bun, and took a deep breath. I would go down with dignity. I would explain that he was trespassing. I would explain that he stepped into my personal space. I would not apologize for defending myself.
I knocked on the heavy oak door of the GM's office. "Enter," a voice called out. But it wasn't Henderson's voice. I pushed the door open. The office was expansive, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Usually, Henderson sat behind the massive glass desk, looking overwhelmed. Today, Henderson was standing in the corner, clutching a file folder, looking like he was about to faint. Sitting in the boss's chair, with his feet propped up on the glass, was the trespasser. He looked perfectly fine. His eyes were no longer glowing, but they were a striking, piercing amber that tracked my every movement. He had cleaned up. His tuxedo jacket was draped over the back of the chair, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. And there wasn't a mark on him. No redness, no swelling. Just a smirk that made my knees feel uncomfortably weak. "Miss Cleo," Henderson squeaked from the corner. "Thank you for joining us." "Mr. Henderson," I said, ignoring the man in the chair. "I can explain. There was a security breach in the penthouse. The individual refused to identify himself and initiated aggressive proximity. I followed standard escalation protocol." "Standard escalation protocol involves radioing security," the man said. He picked up Henderson's favorite fountain pen and started twirling it through his fingers with dexterous ease. "Not chemical warfare." "You didn't give me time to radio security," I shot back, turning to face him. "And you still haven't told me who you are." Henderson let out a strangled noise. "Cleo, good God, woman. This is King Magnus, the owner of the Royal Zenith Collection, the Alpha King." The room went silent. The air left my lungs in a rush. I stared at the man. King. Not just a rich alpha. The alpha. The one who owned the building, the city block, and technically, according to shifter law, my allegiance. I had just pepper-sprayed the king of all wolves. Magnus stopped twirling the pen. He dropped his feet from the desk and leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. The amusement in his eyes was lethal. "You're fired," I whispered, answering for him. "I'll pack my things." "Fired?" Magnus chuckled, the sound vibrating through the floorboards. "Why would I fire the only person in this entire city brave enough to say no to me? You aren't fired, Cleo." He stood up, unfolding his massive frame until he towered over the desk. He walked around it, moving toward me with that same predatory grace he'd shown in the penthouse. Henderson shrank into the wallpaper. "Then what?" I asked, refusing to back down, though my instincts were screaming at me to bow. "Am I being arrested?" "No," Magnus said, stopping inches from me. He inhaled sharply, and his eyes half closed. "You're being promoted." Chapter 3. The Punishment. Promoted? The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I don't understand. Magnus smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a cat that had just cornered a particularly interesting mouse. "Mr. Henderson informs me that you are the head of guest relations. You handle difficult requests. You manage expectations. You solve problems." "I try," I said stiffly. "Good, because I have a problem," Magnus said. He gestured to the office, to the hotel, to the city outside the window. "I am bored, Cleo. Terribly, violently bored. Everyone tells me yes. Everyone bows. Everyone agrees with my terrible ideas just to keep me happy. It's exhausting." He took another step. I didn't retreat, though the heat radiating off him was making me sweat. "But you," he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips before snapping back to my eyes. "You threw me out of my own room. You attacked me. You threatened to drag me down 40 flights of stairs. I find that refreshing." "I didn't know who you were,"
I defended. If I had known, you would have bowed like the rest of them? He looked genuinely disappointed. Don't ruin it. I prefer the version of you that carries a weapon in her blazer. He turned to Henderson, who jumped. Draft the paperwork. Effective immediately, Cleo is relieved of her general duties. She is now the royal liaison. Her sole responsibility is me. Where I go, she goes. If I need a reservation, she makes it. If I need someone to yell at me for drinking the good scotch, she does it. Sir, I interrupted, panic rising. I didn't agree to this. I have a team to manage. I have a career. And now your career is the crown, Magnus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Unless, of course, you'd prefer we discuss the assault charges. Assaulting a royal is a treasonous offense, Cleo. The prison sentence is significant. It was blackmail, pure and simple. He was trapping me in a gilded cage because he found my panic amusing. I glared at him. You wouldn't. Try me, he challenged. I clenched my fists at my sides. I needed this job. I supported my mother. I had bills. I couldn't go to prison, and I couldn't be blacklisted. He knew it. He could smell the desperation on me just as easily as he could smell the vanilla shampoo I used. Fine, I gritted out. I accept the position of royal liaison, but I have conditions, strictly professional. I am not a companion. Magnus laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound. You think I want you as a concubine? Cleo, please. If I wanted a warmer for my bed, I could snap my fingers and fill this room with volunteers. I don't want your body. He leaned down, bringing his face level with mine. The gold in his eyes swirled, hypnotic and intense. He was lying. I could feel the pull, the magnetic snap of attraction that zinged between us like a live wire. He wanted me, but he was too arrogant to admit it. I want your fire, he whispered, his voice dropping so low Henderson couldn't hear. I want to see how long it takes before you crack. I want to see if you're actually brave or if you're just stupid. I'm not stupid, I whispered back. We'll see. He straightened up, buttoning his cuffs. I'm hungry. Make a reservation for 2 at Le Monde, 7 o'clock. And Cleo? I looked up, wary. Chapter 4, The Credit Card War. The next morning, I arrived at the hotel determined to be the most boring, efficient, unshakable royal liaison in history. I would bore him into firing me. I would be so professional, so rigid, that he would beg for a yes man within the week. That plan lasted exactly 12 minutes. I walked through the employee entrance, swiped my badge, and was immediately intercepted by valet. Miss Cleo! Kevin, the head valet, looked frantic. You need to come to the front drive, now. Kevin, I haven't even had coffee yet. What's the problem? Is the King's motorcade blocking the lane? Not exactly. I followed him through the lobby, my heels clicking sharply on the marble. The moment I stepped through the revolving glass doors, I saw it. Or rather, I heard it. The shutter clicks of a dozen paparazzi cameras were going off like a machine gun firing squad. Parked dead center in the no parking fire lane was a car. And not just a car. It was a convertible sports car in a shade of iridescent red that looked suspiciously like the color of a pepper spray canister. A massive white bow was tied around the windshield. Leaning against the hood, wearing designer sunglasses and a smirk that could be seen from space, was Magnus. He spotted me instantly. He pushed off the car and spread his arms wide. Good morning, liaison. I stopped at the top of the stairs, horror washing over me. What is this? It's an apology, Magnus announced, his voice carrying clearly to the gathered press. For yesterday. I realized I startled you. It is only fitting that the king ensures his staff has safe, reliable transportation. Do you like it? It does 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. He dangled the keys from his finger. My face burned. He wasn't apologizing. He was marking me. He was publicly declaring that he was buying me things, blurring the lines between employee and whatever he wanted me to be. The press would eat this up. King spoils mystery staffer. I would look like a gold digger. I don't want it, I said, marching down the stairs. The cameras flashed blindingly. Don't be difficult, Magnus said, stepping forward to meet me. It's a gift. Take the keys. I have a car, I snapped. A perfectly functional sedan that I pay for with my own salary. I don't need your charity, and I don't need your guilt gifts. It's not charity. Magnus's voice hardened slightly. It's an upgrade. It's a leash, I yelled, losing my cool completely. You think because you're the Alpha King, you can just throw money at people and they'll swoon? You think you can buy my respect with horsepower? I snatched the keys from his hand. He looked smug for a split second, thinking I had caved. Then I turned and hurled the keys as hard as I could into the decorative fountain in the center of the roundabout. Splash. The silence that followed was deafening. The paparazzi stopped shooting for a heartbeat, stunned. Kevin, the valet, gasped. I turned back to Magnus. He was staring at the fountain, then back at me. His mouth hung open slightly. I am here to work, Your Majesty, I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. I am not here to be your charity case. If you want a driver, hire one. I'll be in my office. I spun around and marched back up the stairs. I expected him to roar. I expected him to fire me on the spot for disrespecting him in front of the media. Instead, as the doors revolved shut behind me, I heard a laugh. A loud, booming, delighted laugh. She missed the water! Magnus shouted to the press, clearly lying. She's negotiating! Write that down! Chapter 5. The Jealousy Trap. By 6 o'clock, the photo of me throwing the keys was trending on Twitter. The headline read, "The Woman Who Rejected the King." I turned off my phone. I needed normalcy. I needed dull, predictable, safe reality. I needed my date with Gary. Gary was an accountant. He was nice. He liked spreadsheets and beige sweaters. He had never roared in his life. We had a standing date at an Italian bistro 3 blocks from my apartment. It was the perfect antidote to the chaos of Magnus. I arrived at Luigi's right on time. Gary was already there, checking his watch. You're 3 minutes late, Gary noted, offering me a polite, dry peck on the cheek. Rough day at the office, I sighed, sliding into the booth. You have no idea. Well, I ordered the house wine. It's cost-effective, Gary said. I relaxed. This was good. This was boring. I could do boring. We were halfway through the appetizers, lukewarm calamari, when the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure. The chatter at the other tables died down. The air grew heavy and electric. The hair on my arm stood up. No. I turned my head slowly toward the entrance. Magnus stood in the doorway. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit that cost more than this entire building. He scanned the room, ignoring the staring patrons, until his eyes locked on mine. He didn't smile. He just started walking. Oh, God, I whispered. What? Gary asked, looking around. Is that the guy from the news? The king? Magnus didn't stop at a respectful distance. He walked right up to our booth. He looked at Gary, then at me. Cozy, Magnus said. Room for one more? No, I said instantly. We are on a date, a private date. Go away. I can't, Magnus said, pulling up a chair from a nearby table and turning it backward to straddle it. He sat right between us, his knee brushing mine under the table. I own the place. What? Gary squeaked. I bought the restaurant, Magnus said casually, picking up Gary's wine glass. He sniffed it and grimaced.
5 minutes ago. I didn't like the decor, but the location is convenient. And the staff... He glanced at the terrified waiter. They need better training. You bought the restaurant? Gary stammered. While we were eating? I'm an impulse shopper. Magnus said, his eyes fixed on me. When I see something I want, I acquire the environment around it to ensure it's protected. You are insane, I hissed. You can't just crash my date. I'm not crashing. I'm quality control. Magnus took a sip of Gary's wine and spat it back into the glass. Vinegar. Is this what you feed her? She smells like vanilla and fire, and you feed her vinegar? He turned the full force of his alpha gaze onto Gary. He didn't growl. He didn't threaten. He just looked at Gary with a look of such profound,
judgmental pity that Gary began to sweat profusely. I should go, Gary said, throwing his napkin down. I think I left my cat in the oven. Gary, sit down, I ordered. Run along, Gary, Magnus said softly. The wine is on the house. Gary ran. He literally ran, knocking over a chair in his haste to escape the predator at our table. I was left alone with the king. I was shaking with fury. You ruined my date, I yelled, slamming my hand on the table. He was nice. He was normal. Magnus didn't flinch. He reached across the table, picked up the dessert menu, and slid it toward me. He bored you, Magnus said calmly. I could smell it on you from the doorway. You were suffocating in his mediocrity. That is not for you to decide. It is now. He signaled the waiter with a snap of his fingers. Bring us the tiramisu and a bottle of the Barolo, the real Barolo from the cellar. He leaned in, his knee pressing firmly against mine, trapping me in the booth. You have terrible taste in men, little Pepper, he murmured, his voice dark and velvety. Let me fix that. Shall we order dessert? Chapter 6. The Elevator Malfunction. I didn't eat the tiramisu. I didn't drink the Barolo. I walked out of Luigi's, now apparently Magnus's, and took a cab home, leaving the king of werewolves sitting alone with 2 forks. The next morning, I was determined to avoid him. I had a strategy. Stick to the service corridors, monitor his location via the security feed, and ensure there were at least 3 concrete walls between us at all times. It worked until 10 a.m. I stepped into the executive elevator on the ground floor, heading up to housekeeping. The doors were sliding shut when a hand, a large manicured hand wearing a platinum signet ring, jammed between the sensors. The doors bounced back open. Magnus stepped in. He looked fresh, infuriatingly handsome in a navy suit, smelling like cedar and rain. He hit the button for the penthouse, then leaned back against the mirrored wall, crossing his arms. Good morning, Liaison, he said, his voice silky. I'm going to the 4th floor, I said, staring straight ahead at the digital numbers. You missed your chance to annoy me at breakfast. I wasn't annoying you, Magnus corrected. I was saving you from a life of mediocrity. Gary wears pleated khakis, Cleo. You can't marry a man who wears pleated khakis. I wasn't going to marry him. It was a 2nd date. And now there won't be a 3rd. You're welcome. The elevator hummed upward. I watched the numbers tick by. 2, 3. Suddenly the hum stopped. The car jerked violently, dropping a few inches before slamming to a halt between floors. The lights flickered and dimmed to a low emergency amber. The ventilation fan sputtered and died. Silence. I mashed the open door button. Nothing. I hit the emergency call button. Static. Unbelievable, I groaned, leaning my head against the panel. Of all the elevators in this 30-story building, this one breaks. Terrible luck, Magnus said. He sounded completely unbothered. In fact, he sounded pleased. I whipped around. You did this! Me? He placed a hand over his heart. I'm just a passenger. You own the building. You probably have a remote control in your pocket. Accusations, accusations. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over the handrail. It's getting warm in here, isn't it? He was right. With the AC dead, the small metal box was heating up fast. Or maybe it was just him. In the confined space, his scent was overwhelming. It wasn't just cedar anymore. It was musk, heavy and masculine, filling my lungs with every breath. How long? I demanded. How long until you let us out? I don't know, Magnus murmured, stepping closer. He loosened his tie, undoing the top button of his crisp white shirt. Maybe an hour, maybe 2.
It gives us time to discuss your attitude. My attitude is the only thing keeping me from pepper spraying you again, I warned, backing up until my shoulder blades hit the cool mirror. I liked the pepper spray, he reminded me, closing the distance. He placed one hand on the wall beside my head, boxing me in. It showed spirit. But I think I'd prefer a different reaction today. He was too close. The air between us crackled. I could see the pulse beating in his throat. I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. My breath hitched. You're enjoying this, I whispered. Immensely, he admitted. His gaze dropped to my mouth. You're trapped in a box with me, Cleo. No Gary. No staff. No rules. The emergency lights flickered and died completely. We were plunged into pitch blackness. I gasped, blinded. I felt his body shift, pressing closer without touching me, a wall of heat in the dark. Tell me to stop. Magnus's voice came from right beside my ear, a low vibration that shivered down my spine. Tell me you don't want this, and I'll open the doors right now. I opened my mouth to tell him to go to hell, but the words wouldn't come. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. In the dark, stripped of his crown and my uniform, he wasn't the king. He was just a man I was terrifyingly attracted to. Cleo, he groaned, his nose brushing against my jawline. Tell me to stop, or I'm going to taste you. Chapter 7. The Almost Kiss. His breath was hot against my skin. His scent, cedar, rain, and raw, potent desire clouded my brain. I should have pushed him away. I should have screamed. Instead, my head tilted back, exposing my throat to him in an instinct I didn't know I possessed. My voice was a broken whisper. I felt his hand move, his fingers grazing my waist, burning through the fabric of my blouse. He was going to kiss me. And God help me, I was going to let him. Ping! The lights blazed back on, blindingly bright. The ventilation fan roared to life. The elevator jerked and began to ascend smoothly. We sprang apart like guilty teenagers. I gasped for air, blinking spots from my eyes. Magnus stood on the other side of the car, looking wrecked. His hair was ruffled, his pupils blown wide, his chest heaving. He looked at me with a mix of frustration and hunger that made my knees wobble. The doors slid open on the 4th floor. I have to go, I blurted out. I didn't wait for a response.
I ran out of the elevator, nearly knocking over a housekeeping cart. I fled down the hallway, my face burning, my body humming with unsatisfied tension. For the rest of the day, I hid in my office. I expected him to barge in. I expected him to demand we finish what we started. But he didn't come. Instead, the gifts started arriving. At noon, a package was delivered to my desk. I braced myself for another car key or a diamond necklace, something flashy and arrogant. I opened the box warily. Inside were 2 pairs of gel insoles, specifically designed for high heels. I stared at them. My feet had been killing me all week from chasing him around the hotel. How did he know? At 2 p.m., a small courier bag arrived. It contained a box of artisanal dark chocolates, the ones dusted with chili powder, spicy, and a bottle of extra-strength ibuprofen. "For the headache I give you," the note read in elegant, sharp handwriting. At 4 p.m., a book appeared. It was a rare first-edition copy of Pride and Prejudice. I had mentioned to a receptionist 3 months ago that it was my favorite. He had dug into my life, but not to buy me, to know me. I picked up the book, tracing the leather cover. My chest ached. It was easy to hate the arrogant king who bought restaurants to ruin dates. It was much, much harder to hate the man who noticed my feet hurt and remembered I liked spicy chocolate. I opened the front cover of the book. There was an inscription on the title page, written in ink that was still drying. "I don't want you to bow, Cleo. I just want you to stay. P.S. I promise not to bite. Unless you ask." I sank into my chair, clutching the book. He was changing tactics. He wasn't using his wallet anymore. He was using his attention, and that was infinitely more dangerous. My radio buzzed. "Cleo, we have a situation in the ballroom. The lunar gala setup is behind schedule, and Lady Aria is demanding to speak to a manager." I groaned. Lady Aria was a high-ranking council member's daughter. She was beautiful, rich, and meaner than a viper. "On my way," I said, putting the book down. I checked my reflection in my phone screen. My cheeks were still flushed. I took a deep breath. I could handle a spoiled princess. I just had to make sure I didn't run into the king, who was slowly, methodically dismantling my defenses. Chapter 8. The Gala Incident. The grand ballroom was a sea of silk, velvet, and diamonds. The Lunar Gala was the event of the season, a gathering of the werewolf elite to celebrate the full moon. It was also a nightmare to coordinate. I was in my working blacks, a tailored black blazer, trousers, and a headset. I looked like what I was, staff. "You there, girl!" I turned to see Lady Aria standing by the ice sculpture. She was wearing a silver gown that probably cost more than my college tuition. Her entourage of sycophantic friends giggled behind her. "How can I help you, Lady Aria?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "This drink," she sneered, thrusting a champagne flute at me. "It's warm. Fetch me another, and try to be quick about it. You smell like effort." Her friends laughed. It was a classic wolf insult, implying I smelled like sweat and labor because I wasn't born into royalty. "I can flag down a server for you," I said calmly. "I am actually the head of guest relations, supervising the security protocols." "I don't care what your little title is," Aria snapped, stepping closer. She spilled a splash of champagne on my blazer intentionally. "Oops. Well, now you smell like cheap alcohol, too. Go get me a drink or I'll have you removed. Do you know who my father is?" I gritted my teeth. I wanted to pepper spray her. God, I missed my pepper spray. Suddenly, the music stopped. The chatter in the room died instantly. A hush fell over the crowd like a heavy blanket. I turned. Magnus stood at the top of the grand staircase. He was breathtaking. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, midnight blue with black lapels. His hair was swept back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. He radiated power so intense, it felt like gravity had shifted toward him. Every wolf in the room bowed their heads, exposing their necks in submission. Every wolf except me. I stood straight, watching him. His amber eyes scanned the room, bypassing the council members, the wealthy alphas, and the beauty queens. His gaze landed on me. He frowned when he saw the wet stain on my blazer. He started walking. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He didn't acknowledge anyone. He walked straight up to Lady Arya and me. Arya beamed, fluffing her hair, thinking he was coming for her. She dipped into a low, practiced curtsy. "Your Majesty, it is an honor." Magnus walked right past her. He stopped in front of me. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous, pointing to the stain on my jacket. "It was an accident," I lied, wanting to avoid a scene. "It wasn't," Magnus corrected. He turned slowly to face Arya, who was still frozen in her curtsy. "Lady Arya, stand up." She scrambled up, looking terrified. "Sire, she was being rude. I was just—" "You spilled wine on my liaison," Magnus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the back of the room. "You insulted her, which means you insulted me." "I didn't know she was yours," Arya stammered. "She isn't property," Magnus growled. "She is the only person in this room I actually like." He turned back to me, ignoring Arya completely. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silk handkerchief. Gently, carefully, he dabbed at the stain on my lapel. His knuckles brushed my breastbone, sending shocks of heat through me. "You look beautiful in black," he whispered, for my ears only. "But I think you've worked enough tonight." He tossed the dirty handkerchief onto Arya's silver dress. "Hold that," he commanded her. Then he held out his hand to me. "Dance with me, Cleo." "Magnus," I hissed, "I'm working. People are staring." "Let them stare," he said, his eyes burning into mine. "No one looks at me tonight. Everyone looks at you. Take my hand." Chapter 9. The Mating Fever Begins. I took his hand. I didn't have a choice. To refuse the king in public would be a declaration of war, and after he had just defended me, I couldn't do that to him. He pulled me onto the dance floor. The orchestra, taking the cue, began to play a slow, sweeping waltz. Magnus placed one hand on my waist, possessive, firm, hot, and laced his other fingers with mine. We moved, and it was effortless. I had expected him to lead with dominance, to drag me around the floor, but he didn't. He moved with me, anticipating my steps before I took them. We were perfectly in sync, two halves of a whole snapping together. "You can waltz," he noted, sounding impressed. "My mother insisted on lessons," I said, breathless. "She said good posture scares off weak men." "Your mother was a wise woman," Magnus murmured. He pulled me closer, eliminating the polite distance between us, his chest pressed against mine. "But I am not a weak man, Cleo. You don't scare me. You excite me." He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. "God, you smell incredible tonight, like vanilla and victory." I felt a shiver run through him. It wasn't a smooth movement. It was a tremor. His hand on my waist tightened, his grip becoming almost painful. "Magnus?" I pulled back slightly to look at him. He was sweating. A fine sheen of perspiration had broken out on his forehead. His skin, usually warm, was burning hot under my fingertips. And his eyes were flickering rapidly between amber and a glowing feral gold. "Magnus, are you okay?" He stumbled, missing a step. The king never missed a step. He halted in the middle of the floor, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Go," he gritted out, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "What?" "Leave," he snarled. He released me as if I burned him. He took a step back, clutching his chest. "Get away from me, Cleo. Now." "You're sick," I said, reaching for him. "Let me call a medic." "No!" He roared the word, and the sound shattered a champagne glass on a nearby table. The music stopped. The guests gasped and backed away. Magnus looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, but fear for me. "The fever," he groaned, his body shaking violently. "It's too soon. I can't control it." He looked at my throat, specifically at the pulse fluttering there, with a hunger that was purely animalistic. He wanted to claim me, right here, on the floor, violently and permanently. "Run," he commanded, his voice breaking. Then he spun around and bolted. He didn't walk, he ran, shoving guests out of his way, crashing through the double doors toward the private elevators leading to the penthouse. I stood alone in the center of the silent ballroom, my hand still warm from his touch. "He's rejected her," someone whispered gleefully. It sounded like Arya. "Look, he couldn't even stand to be near her." I ignored them. I knew what rejection looked like, and that wasn't it. That was pain. A low, guttural roar echoed from the elevator shaft, vibrating through the floorboards. It sounded like a beast in a cage. The staff looked terrified. The guests looked confused. I looked at the elevator doors. He was sick. He was dangerous. And he was alone. I reached into my pocket and gripped my master keycard. "I'm going in," I whispered to no one. Chapter 10. The Caretaker. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like descending into a volcano. The air grew hotter the higher I went, charged with a static pressure that made my ears pop. When the doors slid open, I wasn't greeted by the luxury of the foyer. I was greeted by the terrified face of the head of security. "Miss Cleo," the burly guard whispered, pressing himself against the wall. "You can't be up here. He's in the fever. It's not safe." From down the hall, a crash echoed. It sounded like a sofa being thrown through a wall. "Where is he?" I asked, gripping my master keycard. "Master bedroom," the guard said, eyes wide. "We tried to send a medic in. He nearly took the guy's arm off. He's locking himself in until the urge passes." "Go downstairs," I ordered. "I'll handle it." "But go." The guard didn't argue. He scrambled into the elevator and fled. I walked down the hallway. It was eerily silent now. I reached the double doors of the master suite. They were locked from the inside. I swiped my master key. The light blinked green. I took a breath, pushed the door open, and stepped into the lion's den. The room was a wreck. A chair was overturned, the curtains were shredded, and in the center of the chaos, pacing like a caged predator, was Magnus. He was shirtless. His skin was flushed a deep, feverish red, slick with sweat. His muscles were coiled tight, trembling with the effort of containment. When the door clicked shut behind me, he spun around. His eyes were fully gold. No iris, no pupil, just raw, blinding light. "I told you to run," he snarled. His voice was unrecognizable, a guttural, distorted growl that vibrated in my chest. "Get out, Cleo." "No," I said. My voice shook, but I forced my feet to move forward. "You're sick. You're burning up." "I am not sick," he panted, backing away from me as if I were the danger. "I am unbonded." "My wolf knows you are close. If you come any closer, I won't be able to stop myself from taking you." "Then don't stop," I whispered. The words hung in the air. Magnus froze. He looked at me, agony warring with desire on his face. "You don't know what you're saying," he groaned, clutching his head. "I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to scare you." "You don't scare me, Magnus," I said softly. I walked right up to him. The heat coming off his body was like a furnace. I reached out and placed my cool hands on his burning cheeks. He flinched, a low moan tearing from his throat. But he didn't pull away. He leaned into my touch, his eyes fluttering shut. "You're so cool," he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. "Why are you so cool?" "Because one of us has to be," I said. "Come on, sit down." I guided him to the edge of the massive bed. He sank down, all the fight draining out of him the moment I touched him. I went to the bathroom, soaked a towel in ice-cold water, and returned. I began to wipe the sweat from his neck, his shoulders, his chest. He watched me with a lucid intensity that was returning slowly. "You stayed," he whispered. "Everyone else runs. You stayed." "I told you," I said, wringing out the towel. "I'm the guest relations manager. Dealing with difficult guests is my job." He let out a weak chuckle. He caught my wrist, stopping my hand over his heart. His pulse was thundering against my palm. "You aren't staff, Cleo," he said, his voice raspy but clear. "You know that. You're—" He didn't finish the sentence. The exhaustion of the fever finally hit him. His eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward, his head landing heavily on my shoulder. "Mine," he breathed against my neck, his nose burying in my hair. "You smell like home." Chapter 11. Morning after. No regrets. I woke up with a crick in my neck and a very heavy weight on my legs. I blinked open my eyes. Sunlight was streaming through the shredded curtain. I was sitting in the armchair next to the bed, but at some point in the night, Magnus had moved. He was asleep on the floor at my feet, his head resting on my knees, his arms wrapped around my calves like I was an anchor keeping him from drifting away. I froze. This was intimate. More intimate than sex. The king of werewolves was using my shins as a pillow. I reached down and tentatively ran my fingers through his dark, messy hair. He stirred instantly. He didn't wake up groggy. He woke up alert. He lifted his head, his amber eyes locking onto mine. The fever was gone. The gold madness had faded, leaving only a warm, intense clarity. "Morning," I whispered. "Morning," he rasped. He didn't move. He just looked at me, tracking the movement of my hand in his hair. You stayed the whole night. You wouldn't let go of my legs, I pointed out. I was trapped. Good. He sat up, stretching his back. The muscles of his torso rippled, and I quickly looked away to keep from blushing. I feel balanced. For the first time in years. He stood up and offered me a hand to pull me out of the chair. When I stood, he didn't let go. He pulled me close, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Cleo, he said, his tone serious. About last night. What I said. You were feverish, I interrupted quickly, terrified he was going to apologize. You didn't mean it. I meant every word, he corrected. But we need to do this properly. I need to make a call. Can you get us coffee and food? I'm starving. He was dismissing me, but there was a sparkle in his eye, a secret excitement. Coffee. Right. I'll go down to the kitchen, I said, backing toward the door. Cleo? I turned back. Thank you, he said, for not running. I smiled and slipped out into the hall. I felt lighter than air. He meant it. He wasn't rejecting me. We were something. I hummed to myself as I waited for the elevator. When the doors opened on the lobby level, I stepped out, heading for the kitchen.
Miss Cleo. The voice was cold and sharp as a scalpel. I stopped. Standing near the concierge desk was an older man in a gray suit. I recognized him instantly. Elder Harold, one of the highest-ranking members of the Wolf Council. Elder Harold, I said, dipping my head respectfully. Walk with me, he commanded. It wasn't a request. We walked toward a quiet corner of the lobby. Harold looked at me with eyes that were flat and dead. I heard about the incident at the gala, Harold said smoothly. And I hear you spent the night in the penthouse. I was assisting the king during a medical episode, I said professionally. Of course, Harold sneered. Let me save you some heartbreak, girl. Magnus is eccentric. He likes toys that fight back. He finds you amusing. But don't mistake amusement for a future. I don't know what you mean, I lied. The king must marry a pureblood, Harold said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. It is the law. He can play with a human-blooded stray like you, but he can never claim you. If you care about him, you won't let him ruin his reputation with a scandal. Enjoy your time in his bed, but remember, you are a placeholder, nothing more. He patted my shoulder, a patronizing, heavy tap, and walked away. I stood there, cold dread pooling in my stomach. A placeholder. Was that it? Was I just a novelty because I pepper sprayed him? I needed to hear it from Magnus. I needed to know the truth. I turned and ran back to the elevator. Chapter 12. The Misunderstanding. My heart pounded in my throat as the elevator climbed back up to the 42nd floor. Harold was wrong. Magnus looked at me like I was the only person in the world. He had said I smelled like home. But Harold's words were a poison that worked fast. He likes toys that fight back. The elevator opened. I walked quietly down the hall. I didn't want to startle him. I wanted to see his face when I walked in. I wanted to see that warmth again.
I reached the double doors of the suite. They were slightly ajar. I raised my hand to knock, but then I heard his voice. He was on the phone, pacing the room.
Yes, I know it's sudden, Magnus was saying, his voice hard and commanding. I don't care about the protocol. Just get it done. I froze. I want the arrangement to be perfect, Magnus continued. Spare no expense. I want her bound to me, permanently. No loopholes. By tonight. Bound to me. My breath hitched. And make sure the press is ready, Magnus said. I want the announcement to go out globally. The king has chosen his queen. The union must be sealed before the council can intervene. He laughed then. Yes, she's difficult. That's why I need the contract ironclad. I don't want her running away when she realizes what she's getting into. The world tilted on its axis. Contract. Sealed. Before she realizes what she's getting into. Harold was right. Magnus wasn't proposing a partnership. He was arranging a trap. He was the king. He was used to owning things. He had bought a restaurant just to interrupt my date. Now he was buying a wife. He didn't trust me to stay. He was going to bind me with laws and contracts and press releases so I couldn't leave. He wanted to own me, just like he owned this hotel. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. I wasn't a queen. I was Cleo. I worked for a living. I had pride. If I walked into that room, I would never walk out again. I would be his pet, his spicy little diversion, locked in a golden tower. No, I whispered. I backed away from the door. I didn't make a sound. I retreated down the hall, my vision blurring with tears I refused to shed. I reached the elevator, but instead of hitting the lobby button, I hit the service level. I went to the locker room. I took off my blazer, the one he had cleaned with his handkerchief. I took my ID badge out of my pocket. It had my photo on it, smiling, from back when my life was simple. I placed the badge on the bench.
I didn't pack a bag. I didn't say goodbye to Henderson. I walked out the back delivery dock, past the dumpsters, and into the busy city street. I hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The airport," I said, "and drive fast." Chapter 13. The Empty Room. Magnus ended the call with a satisfied click. "Excellent," he said to the empty room. "Have the ring delivered within the hour, and tell the florist if there aren't at least 1,000 red roses on this terrace, I will burn his shop down." He tossed the phone onto the bed and ran a hand through his hair. He was grinning. He felt like a teenager. He was going to propose. He was going to get down on one knee, offer Cleo the crown jewels, and beg her to boss him around for the rest of eternity. She would hate the roses. She would probably roll her eyes at the ring. But she would say yes. He knew it. He had felt it last night when she held him. "Cleo?" he called out. "I hope you brought enough coffee for an army." Silence. He frowned. "Cleo?" He walked into the living room. Empty. He checked the bathroom. Empty. "She probably got stuck talking to the chef," he muttered, trying to ignore the sudden cold spike in his chest. He walked to the elevator. He swiped his royal override and went down to the kitchen. "Where is she?" Magnus asked the head chef, not bothering with pleasantries. "Miss Cleo?" The chef looked confused. "I haven't seen her, Your Majesty. She hasn't been down here." Magnus's frown deepened. He pulled out his phone and tracked her employee badge. All staff badges had GPS for security. The dot on the screen was stationary. It was in the basement locker room. "She's downstairs," he said, relief washing over him. "Changing out of her uniform." He took the elevator down to the basement. He strode into the female locker room, ignoring the squeals of a startled housekeeper. "Cleo," he called out playfully. "Stop hiding." He followed the GPS signal to a bench in the corner. There, sitting on the cold metal surface, was her badge. Next to it was her master key. And next to that was the pepper spray canister he had given back to her. She had left the weapon. She had left her access. She had left him. Magnus stared at the objects. The silence in the room stretched, thin and terrifying. The playful, charming man who bought restaurants and joked about khaki pants evaporated. In his place, the Alpha King returned. A low, vibrating growl started in his chest. It built until it was a roar that shook the light fixtures. "No!" He grabbed the badge, crushing the plastic in his fist until it shattered. She thought she could run? She thought she could just resign from being his mate? He pulled out his phone. He didn't dial the florist. He dialed his head of security. "Lock down the city," Magnus commanded. His voice was dead calm, devoid of all humanity. "Sire?" The voice on the other end trembled. "The whole city?" "Every exit, every train station, every airport. Ground all flights, block the highways." Magnus turned and stormed out of the locker room, his shadow stretching long and dark against the wall. "I don't care if you have to tear this city apart brick by brick," he snarled into the phone. "Find her. Bring her to me." He kicked open the exit doors, stepping out into the sunlight. He sniffed the air. He caught the faint, fading trail of vanilla and fear. "You can't run from me, little pepper," he whispered to the wind. "I love the chase." Chapter 14. The Pursuit. I made it as far as the end of my street. I was sitting in the back of the taxi, clutching my knees, staring out the window at a wall of brake lights. We hadn't moved in 10 minutes. The driver, a man named Stan who smelled like old coffee, was smashing his palm against the horn. "Unbelievable," Stan muttered. "Radio says they've shut down the bridge, and the tunnel, and the highway on-ramps. Who shuts down an entire city at 2 on a Tuesday?" I sank lower in my seat. I knew who. Magnus wasn't just chasing me. He was blockading me. He was closing the net. "Turn around," I said, panic rising in my throat like bile. "Take me to the train station." "Trains are stopped too, lady. Signal failure or some nonsense." My phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it. It vibrated again, and again. It was him. I didn't need to look at the screen to know. He was probably tracking the phone right now. "Stop the car," I said. I threw a $20 bill at Stan and scrambled out of the taxi. I couldn't be in a vehicle. Vehicles were traps. I needed to get back to my apartment, get my emergency cash, and leave on foot. If I could get to the subway tunnels, maybe I could lose him. I ran back down the block, my heels clicking frantically against the pavement. My apartment building was a run-down brick walk-up with peeling paint and a front door that didn't lock properly. It wasn't a palace. It was barely a home, but it was the only fortress I had. I burst into the lobby, took the stairs 2 at a time, and slammed my apartment door shut behind me. I locked the deadbolt. I dragged a chair under the handle. Then I heard it. It started as a low hum, vibrating the floorboards. Then it became a roar. Engines, dozens of them.
I crept to the window and peeled back the blinds. My mouth fell open. The street below, usually occupied by garbage trucks and double-parked sedans, was filled with a convoy of black SUVs. They were sleek, armored, and terrifying. They screeched to a halt in a formation that blocked the entire road. Doors flew open. Men in suits, royal security, poured out, securing the perimeter. And then the central car door opened. Magnus stepped out. He looked like a war god. His jacket was gone. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up. He wasn't looking at the security team. He was looking up, directly at my window. He saw me. He didn't point. He didn't wave. He just started walking toward the front door of my building. "Hey, you can't park there!"
My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, yelled from her stoop. Magnus didn't even break stride. "I'm buying the street," he roared back. "Send the bill to the palace." He hit the front door of the building. He didn't use a key. He didn't buzz. There was a loud crack as the lock gave way, and then the heavy thud of footsteps on the stairs. Thud, thud, thud. He was coming. The Alpha King was storming a fourth-floor walk-up in a bad neighborhood because his pet had run away. I backed away from the window, grabbing the only weapon I had left, a heavy ceramic lamp. I stood in the middle of my living room, heart hammering against my ribs. "Go away!" I screamed at the door. The footsteps stopped right outside. The doorknob jiggled. Then, a heavy fist pounded on the wood, shaking the frame. "Cleo?" Magnus's voice boomed through the thin wood. "Open this door, or I swear to the moon, I will dismantle this building around you." Chapter 15. The Hallway Standoff. "I'm not opening it!" I yelled back, clutching the lamp like a baseball bat. "Go back to your palace! Go sign your contracts! Leave me alone!" "Contracts?" There was a pause. The pounding stopped. "What are you talking about?" "I heard you!" I screamed, tears finally stinging my eyes. "I heard you on the phone! You want to bind me! You want to lock me in a cage before I realize what I'm getting into! I'm not a pet, Magnus! I won't be your prisoner!" Silence. Absolute silence from the hallway. Then, I heard a sound I didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It sounded relieved. "You idiot," he said. His voice was closer now, pressed right against the wood. "Open the door, Cleo. Please. If you don't open it, I'm going to kick it down, and Mrs. Gable is going to be very upset about the noise." I hesitated. He said please. The Alpha King didn't say please. I lowered the lamp. I took a deep breath. If he wanted to drag me out, he could have done it already. He could have ripped the door off its hinges. He was waiting. I walked to the door. I pulled the chair away. I unlocked the deadbolt. I flung the door open, ready to swing the lamp. Magnus stood there. He looked wrecked. His hair was wild, his chest heaving, his eyes wide and frantic. He took in the sight of me, disheveled, holding a lamp, eyes red from crying. And he let out a long, shuddering breath. "You ran," he whispered. "You actually ran." "You were going to trap me," I accused, stepping into the hallway. "I heard you. Make sure the arrangement is perfect. Bind her permanently." "Yes." Magnus threw his hands up. "The arrangement, with the florist and the jeweler. I was trying to bind you with a marriage license, Cleo, not a slave collar." I froze. What? I was ordering roses, he shouted, his voice echoing off the peeling wallpaper. I was telling the lawyers to draft a prenuptial agreement that gives you half my kingdom, so you'd know I wasn't using you. I was trying to make it impossible for the council to object. He took a step toward me. I wasn't trying to lock you in. I was trying to lock myself out of ever losing you. Doors all along the hallway creaked open. Mrs. Gable, Mr. Henderson from 4B, and the college kids from 4C were all peeking out, watching the drama unfold. You were ordering flowers? I lowered the lamp. Thousands of them. Magnus groaned, running a hand over his face. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get 2,000 red roses on an hour's notice? And then I come back to the room and you're gone. You left your badge. You left the pepper spray. He looked at me with such raw vulnerability that my anger began to dissolve, replaced by a terrifying hope. I thought you just wanted a toy that fought back, I whispered. Elder Harold said, Harold is a dinosaur, Magnus snarled, and I will fire him into the sun tomorrow. But right now, I don't care about Harold.
I care about you.
He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. I flinched, instinctively stepping back. Magnus froze. He saw the flinch. Pain flashed across his face, real, deep pain that I was afraid of him. Don't, he pleaded softly. Don't look at me like that. I'm not reaching for a contract, Cleo. He slowly, carefully withdrew his hand. He was holding a small black velvet box. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to do this in a hallway that smells like cabbage, Magnus said, looking around at the dirty carpet and the staring neighbors. I had a whole speech planned. There was going to be a string quartet. But apparently you prefer chaos. He looked at me, his amber eyes burning with intensity. So, he said, we do it your way. Chapter 16. The Submission. Magnus did the unthinkable. He didn't just stand there. He took a step back, adjusted his cuffs, and then, with the fluid grace of a predator, he sank down. First one knee, then the other. The king of all werewolves, the owner of the Royal Zenith, the man who made billionaires tremble, was kneeling on both knees on my filthy, stained hallway carpet. Mrs. Gable gasped loudly. One of the college kids held up a phone, filming. Magnus ignored them. He looked only at me. He held the box up like an offering. Magnus, I hissed, get up. You're ruining your pants. I don't care about the pants, he said calmly. I don't care about the dignity. I don't care about the crown. He popped the box open. Inside sat a diamond that was obscene. It was a massive canary yellow stone surrounded by smaller white diamonds, set in heavy platinum. It caught the dim light of the hallway bulb and fractured it into 1,000 rainbows. It was worth more than this entire city block. I don't want to own you, Cleo, Magnus said, his voice steady and loud enough for everyone to hear. I have enough possessions. I have enough subjects. I have enough people who nod and bow and agree. He swallowed hard. I am lonely. I am bored. and I was dead inside until you walked into a room and blinded me." I choked out a laugh, tears spilling over my cheeks. "I don't want a queen who sits on the throne and looks pretty," he continued. "I want a partner. I want someone who will throw my keys in a fountain when I'm being an ass. I want someone who will tell me no. I want you." He took a breath. "Be my mate, Cleo. Be my queen. Boss me around for the rest of our lives. Please." The silence stretched. My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. This was madness. He was the king. I was a hotel manager. This shouldn't work. But looking at him, kneeling, humble, desperate, I knew. He wasn't lying. He wasn't playing a game. He was submitting. To me. I looked at the ring. Then I looked at him. I took a step forward. I reached out and snapped the box shut. Magnus blinked, panic flaring in his eyes. "Cleo?" "That ring is too big," I said, wiping my eyes. "I'll scratch the guests. And if you think I'm wearing yellow, you don't know me at all." He froze. "I can change it. I can get a ruby, a sapphire, a piece of gravel, anything." "Get up, you idiot," I sniffled. "Is that a yes?" he asked, not moving. "Get up!" I grabbed his shoulders and hauled him to his feet. He stood, towering over me again, anxious energy vibrating off him. "You didn't answer," he pressed. I looked at the college kid filming us. "Put that phone away, or I'm telling your landlord about the cat you're hiding in 4C. The kid dropped the phone instantly. I turned back to Magnus. I grabbed his lapels and yanked him down to my level. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll be your queen. But I'm keeping my last name. And my job." Magnus let out a roar of triumph that shook the dust from the ceiling. He didn't bother with the ring. He wrapped his arms around my waist and lifted me off the floor. "Deal," he growled. Chapter 17. The Spicy Claim. "Put me down!" I laughed as he spun me around in the hallway. "Magnus, put me down! Everyone is watching."
"Let them watch," Magnus shouted. "This is my mate. This is my queen. If anyone has a problem with it, you can take it up with my security team who are currently buying the entire zip code."
"Inside," I ordered, slapping his shoulder. "Now." He obeyed instantly. He carried me over the threshold of my apartment and kicked the door shut behind us, locking out the world, the neighbors, and the noise. The moment the door clicked, the laughter died. He didn't put me down. He pressed me up against the door, his hands gripping my thighs, holding me suspended in the air. The playful energy vanished, replaced by the heavy, suffocating heat of the mating fever that had been simmering between us for days. "You said yes," he breathed, his eyes flashing gold. "I said yes," I confirmed, wrapping my legs around his waist. "Say it again," he commanded, burying his face in my neck. He inhaled sharply, growling low in his throat. "Say you're mine." "I'm yours," I whispered. "If you're mine." "I have been yours since the moment you tried to blind me," he groaned. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was an explosion. It was hunger and relief and possession all tangled together. His mouth devoured mine, demanding everything I had. I tasted the desperation on his tongue, the raw need that he had been hiding behind suits and jokes. I tangled my fingers in his hair, pulling him closer, needing to eliminate every millimeter of space between us. I felt a snap in my chest, a physical sensation, like a rubber band breaking. Warmth flooded my veins, a golden light that wasn't just in his eyes anymore. It was in my mind. I could feel him. I could feel his joy, his relief, his overwhelming adoration. The mate bond. It had sealed. He pulled back, gasping for air, his forehead resting against mine. We were both trembling. "You felt that?" he asked hoarsely. "Hard to miss," I panted. "It felt like voltage." "That's because you're electric, little pepper." He kissed my jaw, his stubble grazing my skin. "You just shocked my heart back to life." He carried me toward the bedroom, my tiny, cramped bedroom with the IKEA bed frame. He didn't care. He looked at it like it was a throne. He set me down gently on the mattress, looming over me, blocking out the light. He looked at me with such reverence it made my chest ache. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he'd said it. He didn't make it a big declaration. He just stated it, like a fact, like gravity. "I love you too," I admitted, reaching up to undo his tie. "Even if you are an arrogant, bossy, overdramatic trespasser." He smirked, catching my hands. He kissed my knuckles, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out the pepper spray canister I had left on the bench. He placed it on the nightstand next to the bed. "What are you doing?" I asked, eyeing the canister. "Insurance," Magnus said, kicking off his shoes and climbing onto the bed over me. He settled his weight carefully, bracing himself on his elbows so he didn't crush me. "Keep it there, just in case I ever forget who's really in charge." I reached over and grabbed the canister. I twirled it in my fingers. "Careful, Your Majesty," I whispered, pulling him down for another kiss. "I never miss twice." Magnus grinned against my lips. "I'm counting on it." Chapter 18. Epilogue. 6 months later. "Revenue for the third quarter is up 12%, I said, clicking the remote to advance the slide. Guest satisfaction scores are at an all-time high, specifically in the luxury sector. It seems people are willing to pay a premium for excitement." I stood at the head of the massive obsidian conference table in the Zenith's main boardroom. I wasn't wearing my old polyester blazer anymore. I was wearing a custom-tailored white suit that cost more than my first car, and on my finger sat the canary yellow diamond that was heavy enough to use as a paperweight. The 12 board members sat in silence, taking furious notes. They were terrified of me. Not because I was mean, I was actually a very fair boss, but because of the man sitting in the corner. Magnus. He wasn't at the head of the table. He had ceded that spot to me. Instead, he was lounging in a leather chair by the window, spinning a pen between his fingers, looking utterly, violently bored with the concept of corporate finance. He wasn't looking at the projection screen. He was looking at me. His gaze was heavy, physical, and unblinking. It was the same look he'd given me in the elevator, in the ballroom, and in my bed this morning before I dragged myself away to come here. "Mrs. Cleo," a voice interrupted. I paused. It was Mr. Vance, a legacy board member who still hadn't quite grasped the new hierarchy. He cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "These numbers are impressive, certainly," Vance said, his tone dripping with condescension.
But are we sure this strategy of immersive guest experiences is sustainable? It feels a bit chaotic. Perhaps we should return to the traditional model.
The room went dead silent. The air pressure dropped. From the corner, a sound emerged. It was low, vibrating through the mahogany floorboards. A growl. Magnus stopped spinning the pen. He didn't move his body, but his eyes shifted from me to Vance. The gold began to bleed into his irises. "Vance," Magnus said. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a guillotine blade. "Are you questioning her?" Vance paled, sweating instantly. "No, sire, I simply meant—" Magnus stood up. The leather chair creaked. He buttoned his jacket slowly. "Because if you are questioning the queen, you are questioning the crown. And if you are questioning the crown, I have a sudden opening for a new board member, one who knows when to shut up." He took a step toward the table. The other board members leaned away, terrified. Vance looked like he was about to have a cardiac event. "Magnus," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Magnus froze. He looked at me. "Sit down," I commanded. The entire room held its breath. This was the Alpha King, the butcher of negotiations, the most powerful shifter on the continent. I had just ordered him like a dog. Magnus looked at Vance, then back at me. A slow, wicked smirk curved his lips. The gold faded from his eyes. "As you wish, my queen," he murmured. He sat back down, crossed his legs, and went back to spinning his pen. I turned back to Vance. "To answer your question, Mr. Vance, we aren't going back to the traditional model because the traditional model is boring, and the king hates boring. Next slide." The meeting concluded 10 minutes later. I have never seen a room clear out faster. The board members practically sprinted for the door, eager to escape the predatory energy radiating from the corner. When the last door clicked shut, I finally exhaled, dropping my shoulders. "You have to stop growling at the stakeholders," I said, organizing my notes. "It's bad for HR." "He interrupted you," Magnus said, standing up and crossing the room in 3 long strides. "He was condescending. I should have eaten him." "If you eat the board, we won't have a quorum," I pointed out. Magnus didn't care about quorums. He reached me, grabbed my waist, and hoisted me up onto the conference table, scattering my meticulously organized papers. "Magnus!" I laughed, swatting his chest. "I have a conference call in 20 minutes. "Cancel it," he growled, stepping between my knees. His hands roamed over the expensive fabric of my suit, possessive and hungry. "I've been sitting in that chair for an hour, watching you be brilliant and bossy. I have earned a reward." "You are impossible," I sighed, running my hands through his hair. "You own the world, Magnus. Don't you have a kingdom to run?" "I am running it," he whispered, pressing his forehead against mine. "The kingdom runs itself. My only job is to keep the queen happy." He kissed me then, a deep, slow kiss that tasted of coffee and devotion. The mate bond hummed between us, a constant warm current that never faded. 6 months ago, I was hiding in a linen closet, terrified of losing my job. Now, I owned the building, and I owned him. He pulled back, his eyes dancing with that familiar mischief. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, familiar black canister. "You forgot this on the nightstand this morning," he said, placing the pepper spray on the conference table next to my hand. I smiled, picking it up. "Did I?" Can't have you unarmed," Magnus said, nuzzling my neck. "You never know when a trespasser might try to steal the good scotch." "I don't think I need it anymore," I whispered, wrapping my arms around his neck. "I think the trespasser has been tamed." Magnus laughed, the sound vibrating against my chest.
Not tamed, little pepper, just enthusiastically managed.
I looked at him, my king, my partner, my headache, my love.
Get back to work, Magnus, I ordered softly. Yes, ma'am. He grinned, and then he kissed me again, and I knew that no matter how much power he had, I would always be the one holding the spice. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Cleo's pepper spray mistake was spicy, you have to see this next one. This heroine didn't just insult the Alpha King, she poked him in the chest and ordered a lap dance because she thought he was a stripper. It is absolutely unhinged. Click the video on your screen right now to see his reaction.